welcome everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Maggie Kaspersky. I'm the liaison to Transcom and the Director of Communications and Marketing at AASHTO. We're excited to have you all here today for our webinar. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We hope you join every month. Transcom's mission is to facilitate the sharing of best practices among state DOTs and other transportation agencies that want to join in. The membership of this committee is comprised of the top communication officials from each of our 52 AASHTO member departments, so that's all 50 states, plus those of DC and Puerto Rico, appointed by each state DOT CEO. But we have hundreds of friends of Transcom, which are folks that like to get involved. They can be communications people at state DOTs or those at within the private sector or elsewhere. So everybody's welcome. Among other activities, Transcom hosts an annual meeting that focuses on, again, best practices, state-to-state collaboration, and professional development. This year, Transcom 2025 will be held in Chicago from September 21st through 24th. You can find the registration link on Transcom's website, which is transportation.org/communications. Or reach out to me if you're having trouble finding it. This webinar series, we highlight the great work done by our state DOT communication offices and share those best practices on everything from social media to what we're talking about today, which is privacy. This is not exclusively for Transcom members, this webinar series. Feel free to invite anybody you think would benefit from the information that we share here. And we record the webinar and it's uploaded at that website I mentioned, transportation.org/communications. Now I'll turn things over to our Professional Development Subcommittee Chair, Kenna Mitchell of the Texas Department of Transportation. Kenna.
Thanks, Maggie, and howdy from Texas, everyone. Hope you're staying cool as summer starts to gear up. I'd like to start with a quick shout out to our subcommittee team. We've got Paul Catul in Mississippi, Elizabeth McMillan in Utah, and spoiler alert, she's one of our speakers today. And way up north is Shannon McCarthy in Alaska. Today's session idea was sparked by a recent viral video out of Ohio. Now get your popcorn ready because you're going to see that video in just a few minutes. But it raised the question, how many state DOTs use their traffic cameras to record? So let's do a quick poll of the group. Does your state record traffic cameras? Drop a note into the chat. If you do, let us know what state you're from and if you record. Here in Texas, we've got a lot of traffic cameras, a huge network, but we don't record, although we've had some recent advocacy and legislative efforts to compel us to do so. So as people are putting their states in the chat, you might make note of some of those states for future resources for policy or procedural questions. Now, we all invest a lot in monitoring traffic flows and highway conditions, but does that cause drivers too, as in the words of Rockwell and Michael Jackson from the 80s, feel like someone's always watching me? Let's meet some states that do and learn about their policies for sharing with the public. First, you're going to hear from Elizabeth McMillan. She's the Director of Communication with the Utah Department of Transportation. And she has worked in the transportation industry for 16 years with experience in positions ranging from public involvement to policy and legislation. She has set a clear mission for their communications team to gear everything towards the ultimate goal of building the only capital we have in government, trust. Next, we'll hear from Renee DeFord with the Ohio DOT. As the digital media coordinator, she leads their digital strategy, produces video series, including The Loop and Scenic Byways, and manages content across all major social platforms. She also trains staff in digital communications and develops their agency-wide social media and multimedia policies. Finally, Vanessa Holman is joining us from New Jersey. During her 12 years at the New Jersey DOT, she has served in many capacities, including speechwriter for the commissioner, legislative liaison, director of government and community relations, director of communications, and as deputy chief of staff. She's also been serving Transcom secretary since 2023. She is currently working in their operations division, learning about the other side of the business and managing special projects. Our presenters are going to go in the order that they were introduced. So Elizabeth, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you very much. So, as I dropped into the chat, I'm grateful to say that Utah is not one of the states that records on our cameras, and that has been really great for us every time we get a question from media wanting to get sorry about this, wanting to get footage. All right, are you seeing like my full presenter view right now or just the presentation? Maybe Kenna, can you tell me?
Yeah, we can see the presentation.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So, getting started, I'm just going to share a quick story with you because even though we don't have the camera situation, we do, of course, have other privacy issues that come up. Utah has worked really hard on building out our connected vehicle system, and we were very lucky to be one of three recipients of a grant last year. It was a $20 million grant, and it's for Connecting the West. So it's for Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, and then some of the cities and counties and transit agencies. So we did a big press event, and of course, we did social media on it. So I'm going to show you this post. We announced the $20 million grant. And then you can see the second post, the second comment that came up within 10 minutes of us posting. The video was all geared toward exactly what the technology is, and we hit the messages about mobility and safety really hard. And part of the reason for that, it was easy to do that because it's mostly emergency vehicles and snow plows that are benefiting from this right now. We don't use it with general public vehicles. So this popped up, and then, of course, it was not the first one. We just kept getting different iterations of, great, now the government is watching you. You always felt like Big Brother was watching you, and it's true. So we had a conversation. Now I'm going to share a little bit of U.T. So we're trying to decide exactly what we want to say to this. We've got like some basic messaging, but we need to respond to some of these comments. So we went and talked to our director, our executive director, and deputy director. And then we had our social media manager and our PIO, our spokesperson. And we got into a very lively discussion because we wanted to be able to say, this is totally anonymous. We're not collecting any data, which right now is true. We don't collect any data from the public. But it's really hard to figure out how to say that in a way that is true, but is not disingenuous, because this technology can be used in a way that is not anonymous. And the OEMs, the ones who we're pulling data from often, they don't have the same principles that we do about how to handle data. In fact, there was a Mozilla research project that I think it was 3 years ago, but we got a terrible score in the transportation industry because every single OEM that they looked at had some kind of disclaimer that said, no, we will not protect your privacy. So of all the sectors that they looked at, the vehicle OEMs were the worst. So my feeling, I'll just tell you that I was the wet blanket in this scenario. My feeling was that I didn't want us to commit to this being anonymous unless we really hedge by saying it's anonymous right now, and the technology that we're using right now only lets us communicate with our own vehicles. And ultimately, that's what we ended up doing. But I share that so that you know, and this probably reinforces what some of you have thought, that it is really tricky to communicate about this and to not overcommit ourselves, because a year in technology time is forever. A year in government making commitments to the public is not. All right, so now let's step back and talk about the big picture. So not just that implementation of V2X technology, but these are some of the things that I think about when I think about privacy. And a lot of this is skewed by the fact that I work with our executive director, who has been asked to speak about this more than once. And when we work on his speaking points, these are things that come up. All right, so first of all, this was in my bio. Anyone on the UDOT communications team or any communications consultant who does work for UDOT probably has this slide saved somewhere, because I send it out so often and I use it so often. Some of this isn't directly relevant to privacy, but the big word there, trust, is. We need people to trust us as the government. And this isn't a brand new thing in 2025. but people generally don't trust the government that easily. And I don't think that they actually trust the private sector a lot, but there's a different visceral emotional reaction to government. We'll get into this a little bit more, but I believe that part of that is because people don't have the same choices with the government. They don't really have a choice about whether they pay their taxes. They don't have a choice about whether we are the ones who invest those taxes for transportation. And that's different from when they make a choice about accepting the terms with a private company, even if it's like a little bit manipulative, but there's still an element of choice. And so I think that's a big part of it. And of course, there are other factors too, but we'll come back to that when we talk about messaging. So trust being our literal capital, we don't make a profit. We're not businesses that make money. Even the revenue that we bring in is not a profit. It's just to reinvest in infrastructure. But trust is the capital. And I used to think that sounded like kind of a cheesy metaphor, and maybe it's a cheesy way of saying it, but it is literally true in that certainly in Utah, and I think everyone's states, having trust influences whether the legislature who appropriates our budget is willing to continue investing at a high rate for us. So when their constituents don't trust the government, don't trust UDOT to invest their money well, they're not going to give us the money that we need to accomplish everything that we want and must accomplish in order to serve the public. So trust is directly related to money, which we need. All right, and then I have strong concerns about privacy. I already alluded to that. And so we'll talk about each of these items, but they come down to safety, which all of us say and truly must be the number one priority for transportation agencies. Funding, and not just because of trust, like I just talked about, and then optimizing mobility. So a very specific way that it relates to safety is connected vehicles. This might be a grim interpretation, but I think it's widely shared that we probably will not get to Vision Zero or zero fatalities, as we call it in Utah, without connected vehicles, connected autonomous vehicles. There is a very direct link between connected vehicles and risks to risks to privacy. So that type of technology does actually rely on being able to link with, communicate with, and pull information from individual vehicles. In my mind, the benefit to safety so far outweighs that risk that we have an imperative to communicate about this in a way that we can get the public to accept that it's worth it. Next is funding. So this is something that sounds so boring, but we've got reauthorization coming up very quickly, the need for reauthorization in 2026. And a huge part of that is going to be usage-based payment. So road usage charge is what we call it here in Utah. That also relies, though, on tracking where people drive, or at a minimum, how many miles they drive, which can feel pretty invasive to people. But without being able to do that, I think we're going to have a really tough time getting reauthorization for the amount of money that we need nationwide and as individual states. And then optimizing mobility. When we talk about what we need to do, so doing our modeling for future infrastructure needs, when we look at our population, when we figure out at what time of day, what time of month, what time of year can we anticipate congestion in certain areas so that we can optimize, that relies on data. And a lot of that data right now we're purchasing through either OEMs, through Bluetooth providers, through even insurance companies. If we can't get that, or if the terms are such that we shouldn't get it because it's not ethical, that really hinders our ability to optimize and plan for our infrastructure in the way that we need to. All right, now I'm going to share a little bit of a case study about our internal communication, and then we'll talk about external communication after that. So I'm going to share some things that I think went well and just help you see what we did here. I'm certain all or most of you have done similar things. So if you ever want to compare notes or just see what we did here, then hopefully this will be helpful. And then a couple of lessons learned. In Utah, just about a year and a half ago, a whole team was created, a privacy team. So a brand new division within our organization, and their whole purpose is privacy. And you can see there, that's the code reference 63A19102. And so you can see the language there that it's the policy of Utah that an individual has a fundamental interest in an inherent expectation of privacy regarding the personal data that the individual provides to a governmental entity. That's kind of general, but they did give rulemaking authority to a couple of agencies. And so this developed into a statewide effort to have statewide policies and then to get each agency to the point where they had their own tailored policies that, of course, aligned with the statewide policies. This is their timeline, which all of us know that a 3-year timeline looks like that's lots of time, but actually is not lots of time to implement anything big. And you can see there that May 2025 is what their goal was for getting all of those initiatives in place. They did a fantastic job and they met their goals ahead of time. This is something that I liked that they did. So they were trying to give the why. They were trying to help people understand at a higher level, not just like what information can you put in to each database and what type of information, where the information comes from. Like that did need to be taught and trained to each of the groups where it was relevant. But I liked that they put this information out. So this is actually a slide that they shared out department-wide, and they didn't do it for everyone at once. They did presentations to smaller groups, but they're still relatively large groups, so that they could get that combination of personal touch and people being able to ask questions while also getting the word out efficiently. And you can see that this echoes some of what was in code, but it also has some UDOT principles to it. And another thing that stands out to me as we look at this is on that first section slide, I had put in that it's finding a balance between making it consumable and relevant to the person that you're training on this, so to our employees and also our consultants, without backing them out all the way to reauthorization. So getting that balance between them understanding why it's important, being bought in that it's important, and then starting to narrow it down to what that's going to look like for their jobs. All right, and then these are their privacy objectives, and this is where it does start to get really into the weeds. And I appreciated that our privacy group worked in lockstep with the communications group on what they put out. And I thought that was important because they made sure that the language was accessible to people, and they were doing their jobs. They were getting right into the nitty-gritty. They were picking things apart, and like that's what that group was supposed to do. But by making sure that they partnered with communications, they also had the benefit of us who were not diving into it at all, asking them questions so we could make sure it was clear, and also being able to say like, well, let's take it back a level. I see why that's important. That was important for you to do a great job. You did a great job. Now let's communicate about it differently. So if that hasn't already happened in your agency and there's a way that you can politely and helpfully offer that help to a privacy group or whatever the equivalent is at your agency, that was a benefit to them. In fact, it was such a benefit that half of them came and joined the communications team afterwards. So that worked out really, really great for me. But it's a mutually beneficial thing. All right, now let's talk a little bit about external communication. To me, this is a huge challenge that we all share, partly because of what I mentioned earlier, that reauthorization, road usage charge, and safety, so connected vehicles. Those are issues that there will be nationwide legislation for, and that each of our states will be affected by what other states have done. Like often we'll say, well, hey, Texas did this, Colorado did this, New Jersey did this. If they did it, it should be okay for us to do it, right? So there's some shared need there, but also because we've got a lot of smart minds just on this call right now and throughout Transcom and all of our agencies, there's a lot of smart people that can work together to come up with strategies. And I regret to say that my final slide that talks about messaging is not really me giving a lot of solutions. It's just me identifying some of the things that I hope you all will help us figure out in Utah, and we will be pro-social and help back. All right, so this is that same post that I shared earlier. And this comment actually only came up maybe like 7 or 8 minutes after the one where it was the big brother, now government knows where I'm going. And I thought that this was interesting because people then added on to this, like they jumped onto this comment in a good way, in that they were saying, yeah, my personal data is not personal data. I take it as a given that my data is out there. It's not private ever anyway. But it also pointed out something, which is that Google and Facebook, those are services that they've bought into because they're participating, they're using those services because they're getting enough of a benefit out of it that it's worth it to them. And also, it's just nice when the public can communicate on your behalf to each other about the other side of things. All right, so then these are some of the communications challenges that I see we collectively can work on. I mentioned earlier, a challenge is that people are inherently less trusting in government than they are in the private sector. It remains mystifying to me. We can't and won't sell their data, but the private sector absolutely can and will, and they understand that it is now the most valuable asset that they could sell. The last information I saw on this was that Allstate doesn't even consider itself an insurance company anymore. They're essentially a data selling organization. And if you think about it, even Utah buys some information that's basically third hand from insurance companies, and we're using it for traveler information purposes. But the reality is it's coming to us anonymized. We're not even buying it directly from them, but they are in fact selling that data. So yeah, I think that one's unfounded, but it's very difficult to communicate, not against it, but otherwise. I mentioned this before too, that people are more accepting when they feel like they have a choice. They don't have a choice when it comes to government spending their tax dollars. And people accept pain if the pleasure outweighs it. So that's where people say, yes, I will accept the Google terms, even though I'm not even going to read them because I want to be able to use those services. And then another one that I haven't talked about yet is that people can't see it. It is just hard as humans to wrap our minds around something that we can't see. And it's hard to even visualize it with graphics. It's hard to show a visual of this with graphics. But actually, the biggest challenge that we've had with the fact that you can't see it is that when we do media events, we don't have a great visual to show. So then it makes it so our stories are less appealing. It makes it so our posts aren't as eye-catching on social media. And it continues to be a challenge that people can't see what we're talking about. So anyway, there we go. We're ending on me just handing back the challenges to all of us. But I do think that it's going to take us all working together collectively. And with that, I would like to thank Maggie for the great work that she does to bring us all together, and everyone who talks on the Transcom shared email and forum, because we're going to need to do this together.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. If you have any questions for Elizabeth, you can drop those in the chat. She also has her email in the chat if you do want to send anything directly to her. Next up, we're going to go to Renee from Ohio DOT. Renee?
Awesome. Thank you, Kenna. Let me just go ahead and share my screen here. All right, so hopefully everyone can see that. But we are one of the DOTs that does watch everyone through traffic cameras, but hopefully not in a Big Brother sense. It's more of a safety standpoint. So just a little bit of background information as we dive in. But we have here in Ohio what's known as what we call the Traffic Management Center. It's located in our Columbus office, which is the state of Ohio, if anyone didn't know that. So some background information on that is that they oversee over 1,300 traffic cameras, and their main job is to monitor and maintain. And it first started out as just monitoring, but since development and centralization of those cameras and that system, it is now expanded to overhead highway message signs. You'll see one here that we often put funny things on, like Camp in Ohio State Parks, not the left lane. It'll be roadside travel signs. It'll be queue warning systems, variable speed limit signs, traffic signals and ramp meters, wrong way detection systems. So it just keeps expanding on trying to monitor and maintain traffic and increase safety throughout our state. Again, they monitor on our state roadway network, not on local roads. So that is a separate system. For some entities like the city of Columbus have their cameras. We can view those, but we do not monitor for traffic signal timing for them. That is a jurisdiction that we don't oversee. But again, so the TMC provides real-time traveler information and actively manages and monitors the flow of traffic through those various roadside devices. As I said, they oversee over 1,300 traffic cameras, and they're really providing that real-time information in what we call our OGO app. It's free to the public. It's also ogo.com. Basically, travelers can get information on weather, on certain closures related to like accidents or a police incident, active construction, upcoming construction. You can see if there's going to be a travel delay. You can actually also see if there's pavement temperatures that you need to watch out for. So in wintertime here in Ohio, as we all know, bridges ice first. So drivers can get that information before they head out on their commute, just trying to get them the most information that we can to make sure that they're driving out there safely. So as for retention and storage, so through all these 1,300 cameras, our retaining period is only a 72-hour period. And sorry about that. It's only a 72-hour period. It started at 5 days. Back in the mid-90s when our traffic management center really started. It was a regional hub, so there was one in Cincinnati and there was one in Columbus, but that was really about it for our state. And then we all came together in 2010 and centralized it just to make it a more efficient manner and to just ease through some technology challenges that we were having at the time. So for video that is extracted and saved, we have to retain that saved footage for 3 years plus the current year. So if there's an incident, for example, that the police is interested in, we will take that off the server and save it. And so that is saved for 3 years plus the current year. Essentially, we work hand in hand with law enforcement frequently on a variety of things. And so they are always reaching out to us for assistance, and we are more than happy to help. We are lucky to have such a great working relationship. Our building is actually right next door to the Ohio Department of Public Safety. So it is honestly, we're blessed for that working relationship. And then as for public records requests, in Ohio, we have 72 hours to verbally or in writing acknowledge the request. Per Ohio law, we're required to respond within a reasonable amount of time. That's up to your discretion to decide what that amount of time is. Sometimes we get requests from law firms for extensive amount of information. So obviously that is going to take a while to get, and they can sometimes be pushy, as some of us know. So it just really, it's about how much time it's going to take for you to gather all that outside of your original duties. By law, we technically cannot withhold footage, even if it's under an active investigation. But as I stated earlier, we work hand in hand with law enforcement. So oftentimes we'll let them know ahead of time that, hey, so-and-so is reaching out. We don't have to acknowledge that request until that 72-hour period, which is more than enough time for law enforcement to get whatever they need from that. But in 2024, we had 7,812 video requests, which is just an insane number from the previous years. It was almost a double, if not triple, video requests from 2023. With that, 4,484 were actually fulfilled. So basically, why there's a discrepancy is sometimes our cameras are not pointed at the correct thing that the person is requesting, or it's outside the 72-hour period, or it's not our camera. So that's why you're seeing that discrepancy in the numbers. And per Ohio law, the footage is free. There was talk recently, I talked to our TMC historian, and he talked about how ODOT wished at one point to charge for public records requests just because we kept getting inundated from insurance companies. frequently with so many requests, and we wanted to deter that into charge, but we are held to a different standard. So per Ohio law, we cannot charge, so everything is free. As for privacy, public record is public record. So that's our line here at ODOT. But I will say there are incidences where TMC pans away from something. So for example, in our District 12 office, which is in Cleveland, Ohio, recently there was just an incident where multiple police and SWAT were involved with a man with a gun, and it all was happening at an intersection. And in those instances, normally TMC will pan the camera away because local news stations have an active feed into our traffic cameras. So they'll be able to see all that. During those police instances, the TMC will take the camera off of OGO so the public cannot view it on OGO, as they have access to our traffic cameras on there. And that's the main way that they see those. So they'll turn the camera off on OGO, but essentially those news stations will still be able to access that feed because they're hardwired in. In those instances, we'll have the TMC pan away or see, hey, like, what does the traffic actually look like out there? Unfortunately, there are times when our TMC is requested maybe by law enforcement, or they're just like zoomed in on an incident to see where it goes, and the news stations are getting a full front row seat to that footage. So in that regard, we're really helping the news stories out there, and sometimes it's inadvertently. But another thing is that we're not an enforcement agency, so we do not go after people that are speeding or unlawful driving behavior. That's not our jurisdiction. If law enforcement requests something from us, we will help where we can, but it is not our job to track down people that are doing illegal driving behavior. And as for the last thing, I know Kenna mentioned in the beginning, there was a viral video out of our state. And so oftentimes, if there's something crazy that happens on the roadways, our TMC will reach out to myself and our press secretary, Matt Bruning, and be like, hey, like, did you guys see this? Thought you'd want to be made aware of this. And it's often like somebody leaving a couch on the side of the highway, or somebody walking along the roadway, or maybe there's a line of geese. One time we had horses on the highway. Nothing surprising here in Ohio. But we like to use these as teachable moments because the best examples of a PSA are real life scenarios. So we often post those on our social media. And without further ado, here's the video that we got that went viral. So you'll be wanting to look for a red vehicle on here, but this is on Interstate 70 southbound in our Columbus metro area. So you'll see the red van idling, has a blinker, has not made it to his exit. Other cars stop, clearly causing confusion, and then you see the rear end collision. And the worst part is the van just slowly leaves the scene after causing all of that. So we posted that, and we were basically like, do not be this driver. It's illegal to stop on the interstate like that. You have to pull over. And it ensued to have this pile up crash. And we made an example out of this person, took it as an opportunity to make a PSA, and it went viral. We often post things like this and it normally doesn't have that reaction, but it got 47 million views on just Twitter alone, which is like insane for us, especially. But there was countless news organizations that carried this footage with the same messaging of don't be this driver. A news organization overseas in Europe, the Daily Mail, reached out and they had ran a story on it. It went all over the place. I couldn't stop seeing that video on my social media feeds for days afterwards. I just really memorized the scene. But that's essentially what caused this webinar and what came into privacy concerns. So many people asked us, oh, what about the driver? Are you going to go after them? What's their license plate number? Who is this? And those are all questions that we referred to. In this case, it wasn't the State Patrol that was the responding unit on this. It was our City of Columbus Police Department. So we referred all of those questions to them because they then became the point agency. I can confirm that they did apprehend the driver, but that's as far as I know. And essentially all those questions about enforcement immediately. We just post this, we monitor and we manage the traffic, and enforcement is up to our partners. And we were very thankful that CPD and the State Patrol, as always, is very open to our relationship and always wanting to be a helpful hand and also assist with any kind of increase in safety across our roadways. So as I said, they often forward us those wild or dangerous driving, and we often use it as, can this be a teachable moment? Is there a public safety awareness message around this? We don't want to just poke fun at someone just because there's certain driving tactics. Like, this always has to have a safety message, because that is our number one concern here at the Ohio Department of Transportation. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Wow, great video, Renee. Amazing catch by your traffic cameras, and those numbers are fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Remember, we still have questions coming up, so drop anything in the chat. Next up, we're going to go over to New Jersey and to Vanessa.
Just kidding. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vanessa Holman. I work for the New Jersey Department of Transportation. I want to thank Renee and Elizabeth for doing such a great job with their PowerPoints that I didn't need to make one. I also want to just piggyback on a few things that they already discussed, but also make a lot of time for any Q&A that we want to have. So at the New Jersey Department of Transportation, from what I could deduce, we have had traffic cameras that store recordings for at least the last decade, probably more. It was added to the New Jersey Administrative Code in 2015. I would assume that that came after a legislative effort, but I could not find any indication of that. So that might be something that I follow up with later. In New Jersey, we record our cameras for 7 days, and then we rewrite them every 7 days. So if there's something that a constituent or law enforcement wants to see, they need to put that request into us within the 7-day period, and then we'll put a hold on that bit of information. To our knowledge, we're one of the few DOTs that actually charges the public for video recordings. We charge $100 for the initial 3-hour time frame recorded and a $50 an hour after that. And to Renee's point, it's because it's really time consuming. And if we didn't charge anything, I think that it would get out of control a little bit, how much of our staffing time would be appropriated to scanning the video timeframes. We don't really review the footage. Let's say I know I had this experience once in the commissioner's office where I was working in constituent relations, where we had a lot of phone calls from people who were referred to us by their local police departments. Let's say there was a hit and run or a situation where the police were called after the scene of an accident. There was no visual. The police can't really formalize the report as having seen anything. And so they will refer the constituent who was involved in the accident to contact DOT. Unfortunately, not everybody does that right away. Sometimes they take their time, or sometimes they get that information later. And so 9 times out of 10, by the time I was contacted, they'd be like, hey, I got in an accident last month and I'm looking for this footage. And it was really upsetting. I felt badly for them because I know they weren't fully informed, but we couldn't provide them with anything. In the instances where they are able to be provided that footage, we will ask specifically, like, what intersection, because sometimes people will see a camera up there, and we have a lot of cameras that are not recording. We have a lot of cameras that are just sensor cameras to change our traffic lights, or cameras that are not constantly recording. But when we do record something and we have to go back and reference it for a constituent or a government agency or law enforcement, our staff are really not allowed to review it and say, oh, this is useful to you or this isn't. We just give them the chunk of the hour or the 2 hours, whatever it is they're looking for. We share the footage with this, I don't know if this is New Jersey only. I don't know, Renee or Elizabeth, if your states do this, but we have something which is kind of like the poor man's Dropbox called Move It in New Jersey, because we don't work with Dropbox for whatever reason. So in New Jersey State, we have this program. It's called Move It, and we're able to upload the footage to that program. If people are requesting this footage, we can give them the link. And in clicking the link, they are able to download that footage through the specific Move It viewer. So you can only open it in the Move It setting, meaning it's a lot more difficult for people to be able to download that footage, share it on social media, post it somewhere else. It kind of is like a sort of an intentional impediment. Our staff are not allowed to use the cameras to view anything that's potentially sensitive or personal information. If they're in our STEMC locations, which are like our big traffic hubs where we have a million TVs all over the place and people are scanning them for traffic data, for weather data, especially in our winter storms, everybody's monitoring those camera systems. They're not allowed to zoom in people's windows. They're not allowed to like zoom in on somebody's body or anything like that. So I'll be honest, our staff, they're so busy, like they don't really care to do that. But to the public privacy perception, I mean, I think it's important to let people know that. We have had quite a few people who have had hit and runs where they come out and they're just like, somebody hit my car, I don't know who, and I think I see a traffic camera. So that's kind of, we don't really get any opposition to this as far as I've been able to experience through our comm shop and our government relations areas. Nobody really calls and complains about privacy issues, but they are just more disappointed that they see what they believe are traffic cameras on the road and they can't get any footage that they want from them. We probably get hundreds and hundreds of these a year. I think the majority of them do come from law enforcement. And the way we operate is if there is an incident or if there is a time period of footage that is requested, if law enforcement requests it from us first, they kind of get dibs on it, and then we're not allowed to share that information with anybody else, which my personal preference doesn't matter here, but I don't really agree with that. So once law enforcement gets their hands on a bit of recording, then if a constituent wants a piece of that recording, they have to go through law enforcement and request it from them directly. They can't pay us to do it for them anymore. I think that as far as like people coming in, I don't know if there's like, I don't know if the public is fully aware of how to request this kind of footage. When I started noticing that there was a big influx of constituent calls that were like specifically insurance related, I was able to track it down to a few specific police departments that were kind of giving out bad information. And I was able to contact those police departments and tell them, like, please stop telling your constituents that we're going to save them in their traffic dispute or in their insurance liability dispute because you're sending them to us like a month late. So it was like a really frustrating thing that I encountered, but I think that with some communication through the agencies and through our law enforcement partners, we were able to kind of rectify that. And then we wouldn't get as many disappointed people calling the front office. But we do have like a link on our website where people can go in and fill out a simple request form. And that's about it. I don't know if we have anything else that's like much more interesting. I know that in New Jersey, it's probably been old hat enough that it doesn't seem to be a hot topic for anybody. Hopefully, I'm not jinxing us, but we've been doing it for a while. I think that giving people 7 days is enough wiggle room that the people who are aware of what they're able to do and how they're able to obtain that information are given enough of a grace period to get it done. And that's about it. I think I would rather hear from other people who have questions or who are thinking of implementing these strategies in their own state. So I will hand it back to you, Kenna. Thank you.
All right. Kenna, I'll just let you know that we've got a couple questions in the queue here. First of all, for Renee, who is handling those 8,000 requests? That's especially without payment. That is a job. Who is handling that?
So it's all essentially how a request comes through is oftentimes it comes through communications. So we have just about 24 public information officers throughout our state. So they're usually the ones that are the front line. They either receive a request via phone, email, social media. It'll be formal, it has to be formally written. I'm making a public records request for such and such footage on this day, between this hour and this hour. Most of those are filtered out because they're outside the 72-hour window. So then our communications, once that is identified that it's within the 72-hour window and it is our camera and it's pointed the right direction, we will then forward it along to our traffic management center, which I don't have the exact staffing count, but I'm going to say it's maybe 20 individuals that are all housed in our central office. They work 24/7, 365 days a year. It is open. So there's a day shift and a night shift, but they're the ones that are managing those requests. And we always send out all of our footage is sent out through a share file link. Basically, if you want a CD, you don't get it. It's either our way or the highway, literally, because otherwise we would not be able to. We don't have the ability to request or make a CD, or a drive is automatically encrypted whenever it's made on our network, so it wouldn't be able to be used for the public.
Okay. Are any of you seeing the flock cameras along your roadways? I don't know what that is, just as an FYI. So that would be helpful if you can explain what that is to me, one of you. If yes, have you had to respond to the news and public about it? And how have those responses looked?
I also don't know what a flock camera is.
Okay. Elizabeth, do you want to give me a little more on that? Elizabeth, who asked the question. Sorry, not Elizabeth McMillan. Unless you know what those are.
Well, I'm Googling it.
Flocks are
Anyone?
higher tech.
Bueller?
They're higher tech that specifically capture license plates. That's helpful. Thank you, TJ, as well in the chat.
We do not do license plate readers in Ohio. So like that's not technology that we are like coordinating with or using. Like bottom line, we're not an enforcement agency, so that is not something we're going to partake in. And if we got questions about it, we would kick that to law enforcement.
Elizabeth, Vanessa, any comments on that as well? Any experience? Elizabeth, I saw you shaking your head. No, you don't have those either.
So we don't have them, but we actually just about a month ago wrapped up a year-long effort that we thought was going to end in us having those cameras and doing license plate reading for tolling. And it ended up being so unpalatable because of privacy that we just pulled the plug after the study and documented why. And yeah, that will not move forward.
Vanessa?
As a state agency, we don't have any traffic cameras that are specifically for license plate readings. Our tolling roads are operated by separate agencies. We have the New Jersey Turnpike Authority, and we have the South Jersey Transportation Authority. They manage some of the bigger ones like the Expressway, the Turnpike, the Parkway. They have license plate readers at their tolling stations, but they're irrelevant to DOT. We don't get any of that revenue. We don't manage any of those systems. So we don't, as a state agency, we don't have anything to do with that.
I'm seeing comments on these flock cameras saying that private companies, localities are putting them on roadways, even if it's not the state DOTs. And so I'm sure state DOTs still get the questions on it, which is why I think this person asked it, which is a good question. Because I'm guessing this happens a lot where you still get the questions, even though it's not yours.
Yeah, in that case, like our comm shop would just kind of deflect and say, like, they're not on state highways, and we would refer you to whatever local entity you're seeing.
I think this is for you, Renee. Is that 72 business hours that you hold these, or workday hours, or like hours in the day, or business hours?
It is hours in the day.
Okay.
It's not strictly Monday through Friday. It's 72 hours. So if they send us the request on like a Friday night and we don't see it until Tuesday morning, rip, so sorry, you're not getting it.
Okay. Question for Renee or other states that record traffic cams. How do you provide the requested video?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that earlier, but it's only through a share file link that we do it. So they'll download the footage from what we call our milestone, which is where you can view all the traffic cameras, and then we'll send out a share file link via email. And that's basically the only way that we provide it.
Question on charging for this. New Jersey charges $100, I think you said, for a 3-hour time frame. Do you see a trend on who's paying that? Is it typically insurance companies versus members of the public? Do you have a way to tell?
It's usually insurance companies. But sometimes a member of the public is desperate enough that they will reach out and ask for it. But if they call and inquire, at least I used to do this when I would get the phone calls. I always try to help the citizens out and like refer them to their insurance company. If it's going to end up in that way anyway, if they're insured, then they might as well have their insurance company request it and pay for it as part of the claim.
Another question on Elizabeth, you had mentioned with connected and automated vehicles, in terms of that's how we're going to get to achieving zero fatalities, which is something that every state DOT is interested in. And that brings privacy issues too. And so we're going to have to address it at least in that. Is everybody seeing kind of shifts in leadership thought on these sorts of things? I mean, from where we were years ago to now, are we seeing kind of trends in going in one direction or another? Or are they kind of staying sort of stagnant with the public and leadership?
From my perspective, it feels like the pendulum is swinging like backward as far as what we're hoping to accomplish right now, that there's been an increase in sensitivity around privacy. We had a law passed in 2017 that said we could use license plate reading cameras on state highways. And the feeling at that time with leadership here in Utah's legislature was like, I don't know, every private company has my data. I don't understand why this would be a big deal. And that's like in a very, very red state that they had that reaction. Fast forward to 2 months ago, and Utah's Senator Mike Lee put out a bill for consideration that is specifically about vehicle privacy. So withdrawing some of that access, a lot of that access, actually. And so being Utah, we went and had a conversation with him about it, and he seemed to listen and consider the possibility of backing away from it, but it obviously was still a very hot issue for him. So that's just world according to Elizabeth. It feels like it is swinging back a bit.
Another question, even for Ohio, even with the 72-hour limit, do you run into any data storage issues? And this is Paul from Mississippi. Even in rural Mississippi, that would be a ton of data to store considering the number of high definition traffic cameras that we have. Do you run into that?
To my knowledge, we don't have an issue with storing it, and that's why it's only 72 hours and why we brought it back down. Part of the reason, obviously, the number of requests that we were getting in the past in the mid-90s, why it was previously 5 days, and we backed that down. That we're not hosting that data for long term, so that is why after 72 hours it's getting erased. So we don't have any, to my knowledge, data storage issues in that capacity.
I think that's all the questions we have in the chat. Let me just be sure. Yeah, I think that's it. All right. Last call. But everybody does have the emails of our speakers too. So if you think of something, maybe. Here's one. Do any of you have private companies that are recording the live camera streams and then either selling that footage or putting it out publicly on YouTube? We have a few organizations doing that, including law firms, and thus making our message that we do not maintain a recording problematic since the public feels that the footage does exist. That's interesting. That's coming from Virginia, I think. That's an issue.
I haven't seen that in our state, or at least I personally haven't heard about it. I think that, to Renee's point, sometimes media have used some of that footage, or I mean, I know there's been situations, and this didn't even come from our traffic cameras, but there's been situations like when we had those very notable sinkholes on our interstate highway I-80 recently, where on-site contractors were filming something on site, and then that footage got to the news and it was used that way. So it's something that we can try our best to control, but it's not something that we really have any handle on. I don't know of anyone that's selling anything, because that seems like that would be more of an issue. But people are pretty accepting. I think it's really because we save the stuff for a whole week. I think that kind of saves us, because people are pretty accepting of the fact, like, it did exist at one point in time. We're not storing it forever and now it's gone, versus we don't have it at all. So maybe that's kind of saved us in the sense that it is available for 7 days. If you miss the window, then that stinks. But I don't know anything about law firms that are doing that. Not in our area anyway.
To my knowledge as well, I don't think we have that issue in Ohio. It's mainly clout chasing from news stations. As more news stations are having an online presence and really trying to get the youth involved on Instagram and TikTok, that's why we work really hard as a comms unit and with our TMC to get out in front That's why we were the first to post that traffic camera footage, and then everybody ripped the story from us. So it's courtesy of Ohio Department of Transportation. Like we're the one, we really work really hard to get in front of those incidences, and our TMC does a really great job of panning away from anything that would be worth selling. I mean, if you want to sell traffic camera footage of I-77, just the endless amount of brake lights, go for it, I guess. But to my knowledge, we don't have private companies doing that practice, and if they are doing it, clearly it's not very well because we haven't heard about it. So
In
Denise just
Utah,
put in. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Oh, go
Elizabeth.
ahead.
No.
We do allow companies. I don't know that we have any individuals who are doing this, but we do have companies, and they're allowed to tap into our system, and they're not allowed to tap into it in the way that, like, we do have some local law enforcement that we allow to actually move the cameras when they need to. So we've got MOUs with them. We've got agreements about when and how they're able to do that. But we do allow news media and a couple of other organizations to tap into just whatever the feed is. So they can't control it, but they can consume it. So like our local news media will use those during their traffic alert things in the morning. So they'll just show a little bit of what's going on from our camera. So we do allow it, but they have to sign a legal agreement with us about how they're going to use it. But we did have one company, and it was an insurance company, who was using it like as a hook to get people to go to their law firm. So they weren't selling it, but they were saying like, look, we have access to this. We can record certain areas, and then we might have your footage for you. And that was a little bit more ambiguous, but we did eventually get that shut down. And to my knowledge, they haven't followed up with the request for an MOU.
Got it. But there's some folks chiming in on the chat too. Minnesota's had the issue with private groups recording the video and using it, selling it. It
I
can
clicked the
be,
link that Denise sent in.
yeah,
About to send this to our traffic group.
that's
camera
good to
group.
know. Thank you, Denise, for posting that.
I'm in this page like, oh, this is happening right now. Okay.
Mhm.
Thanks, Denise.
Okay, I think Kenna, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I think we hit all the questions.
Yes, and we're going to get out right on time. So that's it for today's webinar. Again, you can reach out to any of our panelists if you do have specific questions. The webinar has been recorded, and we're going to post that link on transportation.org/communications within the next few days. Next month, it's going to be a little bit of a twist, and anyone can be the speaker. It's going to be our first social media showcase showdown, and it is going to be on July 17th. I'm not sure if that is sharing now. There we go. So again, it's going to be a fun chance for you to show off your best work and bring some ideas. Bring your notepads, because, hey, you can steal some ideas and pass them off as your own later. We've done this before with Work Zone Awareness Weeks, but this time we're going to give it that little twist and do some social media with it. So look for more details on that. And again, just a reminder about those Transcom skills contests. The deadline has been extended to July 7th, so be sure to get entries in and get registered for that annual meeting in Chicago. So on behalf of today's speakers and our webinar team, thank you everyone for being here, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.